Okay, so this is a new project and the title is The Universe We Dreamt. So as you see on the left-hand side here, I already have the folders imported, so sequences is empty since we haven't established or created a new sequence yet. And what I like to do as well is just create a folder called nested and drag that into sequences, so that way if I do need to nest any clips, I can keep it organized with it in this folder. I like organizing by name because when you go to footage, you can see that it actually has all of the clips now in chronological order from when you shot it. So the first thing we're going to do is select all of the footage here, go to modify, interpret footage, assume this frame rate, and 23.98 because that's what I know the export settings are going to be. Now all of this footage was shot on the 1DX. Some of it was 1920 1080 at 120 frames a second, and that's what these purple ones here are. And some of it was shot in 4K 60 because there was high dynamic range with the sun setting, and I wanted to retain as much information as possible. You could tell the 4K 60 footage because it has this little icon here next to the film reel. What I'm going to do is select a 4K clip now that it's 23.98. When I drag it into the sequence, it's automatically going to conform this project to be 4K at 23.98. What we could do next is take this sequence and actually scroll to the sequence folder, drop it in so it stays organized. Then what I like to do is minimize footage. I'm going to delete this clip now that I know the sequence is set up correctly. And then I'm going to go to sequence, I'm going to go ahead and title this sequence The Universe We Dreamt. And this is going to be the sequence that we do all of the final editing in. Now what I'm going to do is duplicate, title this one Selects. And this is going to be the sequence where we do all of our organizing as previously mentioned in the last episode. So double click select so it pops up. And now what we could do is take all of the footage, highlight it, and we're just going to drag and drop it into the select sequence. Now click here, hit D so it goes to the beginning, minimize this footage folder, and now we're ready to start making selects. I'm going to raise this V1 up so that way I can see the thumbnail, so when I'm quickly scrubbing through I know which one's which. I'm going to hit minimize to zoom out. Command A to highlight everything, Command L to unlink the audio. I'm going to take all of the audio since I'm just going to be using a music track as the audio bed, and delete. Now what I can do is Command A again. I'm going to right click, set to frame size since some of it's 1920. Now what we can do depending on the speed of your computer is click the playback resolution, and I'm going to go full so that way I can scrub through and actually see what the details look like within each shot. What I like to do is zoom in, and now I'm literally just going to hit spacebar and go ahead and start making selects from each clip. What I like to do is just toggle through, and I can tell where the beginning of a shot starts or beginning of a shot ends. So for example, this shot here, I'm doing a tilt up, I can hit Q to start, trims the beginning, scrub through, and now it goes to the top. What I'm going to do is hit Command D to make a cut there, and just continue to go through to see if there's another good shot. So this one looks like she's moving her arm, so I'm going to hit Q right here. She moves it up, camera pushes in, nice eye contact, a little smile and a lens flare as I'm pushing in, and it stops right about there before I do my backwards motion. So I'm going to hit Command D again, make another cut, and see if there's anything remaining in this frame that I could use, and there's not, so I'm going to select it, hit D, and now we're at the beginning of the next clip. What could help in this process, if you'd like to, putting on a soundtrack or a score that you feel either fits the vibe or the tone of what you're going for, or if you already have, say for example, you're doing a music video and you already have the song that you're going to be editing to, you can listen to that while you're pulling all of your selects. And this is the process where you essentially get to go through and find the exact shots that you like. That way when you start building out your edit, you already have a reference of what puzzle pieces you have in order to finish the puzzle. Even the process of watching through the footage then gives you a reference of how you can build out an edit later. By knowing there's a shot that starts within the weeds and slowly tilts up to reveal a character with the sun behind them, you can then already start to piece together a story. It's a nice bird action in the background. A rack focuses from the bird to her face. Gonna make a cut there. And if you want to, if there's a particular shot that you know you really like or you may want to use for a specific scene, you can go ahead, right-click, label, and maybe change the color to something that is easier for you to remember. So you can go to green maybe, since there's green trees here, and that way when you are starting to scrub through, from a bird's eye view, you can remember, hey, this is the shot that I was thinking of earlier. Now, depending on how much footage you have, you can continue to do this either by hitting spacebar and watching it all the way through, or you can kind of drag and do a little faster version to see what you have. The trick to know is what the story is within the shot. Next, what I like to do is start to paint the narrative together. That way I can create a visual with a clear and beautiful story. So within my select sequence here, I was playing around with the idea of creating an 80s filter so that way it feels like an 80s nostalgia film. And to do that, what I did was take this clip and add two effects, color emboss and color balance. For color emboss, I changed the contrast to 250. Then, by holding Alt and dragging up, I was able to create an exact duplicate layer right on top. As you can see, the only shift is with the green now, so the green is as high as it can go and the blue is down to 0. What we essentially created was a red, green, and blue setup. So for the bottom, the blue is at the highest, the other two are at 0. In the middle, the green is at the highest and the other two are at 0. And on the top, the red is at the highest and the other two are at 0. If you want to double check these numbers just to make sure you're getting the same results, you can. And then lastly, created an adjustment layer by right-clicking, new item, adjustment layer, and on the adjustment layer we added noise at 10% and wave warp. Change the type to square and the wave width to 1000. And lastly, the wave speed to -0.1 so that way the lines are going down instead of left to right. Lastly, you can go within Lumetri or Magic Bullet, whatever plugin that you have on your computer, and change the curves. So raise the shadows into the midtones, evened out, and then lower the midtones to the highlights. This way, the highlights are softened and the shadows are raised. This gives a beautiful nostalgic faded look to the image. So what I went ahead and did is hit X to select this entire clip. I exported it out as an Apple ProRes. I hit Command E to export, chose QuickTime, Apple ProRes 4444, did match source, and then I exported it out into the project folder, into a subfolder titled Renders. The title is Filter Export 1, that way each time I export, I could just do Filter Export 2, so on and so forth, and keep it in order of scenes. Now I'm going to go into the sequence titled The Universe We Dreamt, because that's where the edit will occur. I'm going to go hit Command I for import, select the project folder, go under Renders, and import our first 80s filter shot. Gonna go ahead and double click it, select only the video, drop that into the sequence. Next, I'm gonna create a bin here called Renders, and then I'm gonna just drag that into the folder, that way it's neatly organized. Now I wanna see what type of look we could achieve with this shot. I'm gonna zoom in, let's go ahead and bring it to the beginning. And as you can see, it has this amazing 80s look to it. Let's go ahead and color and see if we could bring out the oranges and the reds and maybe just brighten up the scene a little bit. So I'm gonna go to Effects. I'm gonna go ahead to Colorista and drop on Colorista 4. Select, go to the Effect Controls, scroll down. The first thing I'm gonna do is take the highlights and bring it into this orange area here. Get this nice warm feel, especially since we're at the beach. Next, I'll take this mid-tone and probably bring it towards the pink area here. That way you have a nice golden hour feel. And lastly, take the shadows and bring it towards the greenish blue area. Go ahead, play around and see what feels good for you, but I really like this green hue coming in. I'm Gonna go ahead and drop the shadows a little bit, add more contrast, maybe brighten up the midtones. Drop the highlights so it has this nice soft feel to it. And now when we scroll down, I'm gonna go ahead and take the oranges and shift them more towards red here. Desaturating it a little bit. Taking the yellow, let's put it towards the green. Desaturating it a little bit. Take the green, leave it as is. Aqua is not doing much. So if we go to the luminance of each color, we could take green, really allow that to shine through. Yellow, nice and bright. Orange, not washing it out too much. That's looking great. Now let's take the blacks, crush the dark areas there, adding some more contrast into the scene. Midtones, let's brighten it up a little so that way the face isn't so blown out. So right now I'm just really trying to look at the skin and get it as smooth as possible. There you go. It's looking amazing. Lastly, what we can do is go to sharpen. Let's put on about a 10% here, just to bring more clarity into the image. Now when we go ahead and watch that, it's got a really amazing look to it. The final thing we can do is go to favorites and throw on warp stabilizer and just smooth out the motion of the shot. Stabilizer's done, let's see how it looks. Pretty beautiful. So while filming, we did an entire sequence where Gracie, the lead actress, is drawing in her notebook. The idea for this scene is she's listening to classic 80s music, just sitting, reminiscing in her room. And as you can see, she's listening to a cassette player to really set the tone and vibe of the 80s. The idea is she's writing in her notebook, making a narrative of how it feels to be living right now in her life. So while she's reminiscing, thinking about what it feels like to be filled with love and a kid and having imagination again, not being scared to doodle in your notebook and just draw whatever feels real to you. So while she's sketching in her notebook, she starts to draw a flower, and the flower starts to build a scene around her. So what we did within the shot is we got a plate of the notebook with different tracking marks that can be used for rotoscope. That way we can add a clip within this page, but then for the camera to actually come down towards the clip that's beginning to play, and it slowly starts to morph from the drawing into real life. And this is showing entering the subconscious of the character's mind. And that's when the 80s filters will really come into full effect. So what we could start to do is building out the scene of this character alone within their bedroom, reminiscing, journaling within their notebook. And eventually it reaches the sensation of you're no longer alone, you're actually filled with the wonderment of imagination. So what we could do is go to the beginning of the first clip within that shoot day, hit T for track select forward tool, click, and it's going to highlight everything from there on. We're going to hit A for arrow, right click, label. Let's go ahead and make this Caribbean. That way it has this nice, bright, luminescent feel similar to the look within the frame. So as you can see, this is a move going left to right, revealing the character in frame. Now this was actually shot handheld on the 1D at 120 frames a second. So as you can see, there is shakiness within the frame from physically just walking from left to right. This can be easily fixed with warp stabilizer, so I don't allow it to throw me off and make this select. If I don't land the shot on the first take, I'll do it again to see if I can make it better. So this first wide shot, I really like the dynamic of going from left to right here. Nice and slow, revealing the world that we're in. So it could end about here. What I like to do, place the selects underneath the editing sequence here, and just kind of drag this down a little bit, because right now we're simply composing just the visuals. So if I drag this down a little bit, that way I could see the top of it. I feel like this is a beautiful first wide shot, can drag it into the editing sequence, and the beauty of it is it doesn't delete it from your select sequence. So that way, if you decide, hey, maybe it doesn't work right here, delete, you always could have it for reference. I'm gonna go ahead and place this to the front since this could be a potential first opening shot. And I think the first thing we know that wants to be done here is adding a warp stabilizer. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And as I'm waiting for the warp stabilizer to be finished, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and start playing with the coloring. That way we can set the tone for the rest of the video. So I'm going to go ahead and throw on @color, which is a plugin that I have here. What it simply does, it adds in one of my looks, which is 3 of my video LUTs just put together in different percentages. It has a built-in sharpen, which is at 12%. And lastly, it just says colorista, which is always the first thing I go to when changing the color. If you want to start saving custom presets for yourself as well, you could just go ahead, minimize it, highlight look, sharpen, and colorista. Once you apply it, right click, save preset. And then you can title it whatever you want. I always add an at the beginning of my newer ones now, so that way they appear first under my favorites tab. So I'm going to go to colorista now and just start making some adjustments to give this tone a more 80s evening feel. So what I'm going to want to do is take the shadows and really bring them into the blue here. When I think 80s, I think pink and blue neon, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and try to emulate here. Go ahead and bring the midtones into the blues here. We could even bring the highlights towards the green here to make it feel even more evening. And as we scroll down, we can go ahead and change the HSL here. Let's go ahead and bring orange a little bit more towards the red here. Looks like a nice saturation for skin tone. Yellow, let's bring towards green to really match that. Green, let's go ahead and bring it up a little bit and towards aqua. Let's bring this aqua color more towards blue. Brighten it a little bit. Now I'm just going one by one, kind of moving it around, seeing what it does with the frame and if there's any adjustments that I like or dislike from it. Now that's looking like a really beautiful frame, almost like there's moonlight. I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna bring the blacks down, just darken it a little bit. Same with as we get towards the midtones. Really just allow it to feel like evening. Awesome. Beautiful. And let's go ahead and play through plus the warp stabilizer now that it's completed. Okay, not looking too bad. First thing I notice is the distortion in the blues, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring that back up a little bit so that way there's not so much distortion. Same with aqua here. Really try to level it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and export this shot out. I'm gonna put it in the renders folder, title it filter export to Apple ProRes 4444. Match source, export. The reason why I'm exporting this clip is so when we import it back in, we can scrub it all the way through without having to render. And all the plugins and filters are already still on the shot. This just allows the workflow to be a little more smooth.